Yeah. I'm working.
If you're remote, you're remote. I'm, of course, going to launch this poll asking where you are, just because I'm curious. Yeah, so we're just starting off with the usual. I hope you guys all had a good weekend. I am exhausted from my weekend. It was one of those, just one of those weekends. My husband's trying to teach me how to dirt bike, and that shit is exhausting. Holding on for dear life is exhausting. So that's what I'm working on, holding on for dear life and then trying to like relax so my hands don't go numb and that I can actually still feel the handlebars. All right, we're still waiting for a few more people to tap in. I'm fine with waiting for that. I'm going to go ahead and just take care of a few easy housekeepings. We've got our Unit 3 essay that you guys submitted 2 weeks ago. I grade all of those on my own, and since there's 200 of them, it's like I do 20 a day, and I'll be getting those up for you. They'll be ready for you after class on Wednesday, so you can look over those to be prepared for your Unit 3, Unit 2 essay grading is almost done. I don't know why I have Unit 3 up there. Unit 2 essay grading is almost done. Unit 3 essay will be available this week, and you'll be able to use the feedback from the Unit 2, there we go, from the Unit 2 essay in order to empower and prepare yourself. One of the things I'm just going to highlight is that one of the big issues I'm seeing on this essay is that a lot of people forgot to answer or address the second part of some of those questions. So grades are lower on this one so far. I'm actually surprised by how much lower they are on this one. And it just has to do with people did not answer part of the essay question. And specifically, it was related to the memory one. People wrote out these beautiful, wonderful memories and then gave barely any science on recall, learning, any of that stuff. And then we had asked you to address what you learned and how learning theory was related to what you learned. And a lot of people didn't take care of that learning portion. So I'm just going to highlight that for any of you who omitted those. I included that feedback on your grading so far. Okay. We're still waiting for a few more people to engage in the polls, but I'm going to go ahead and close that one out. Here we go. Pretty consistently. We're having about 23 people in this $85,000 arena that we refurbished so we could have face-to-face classes. And we got quite a few people zooming in. Here's what I've learned. I've learned that this option of having things be remote is actually really beneficial for people. You never know what life's going to throw at them, independent of COVID drama. So my hope is that maybe I get to offer, maybe next fall, this is the fantasy, we're able to meet face-to-face, we don't have to be 6 feet apart. And I still hold my 250 person class. But then I have a remote section of, 35, 40, 50 plus that get to just tap in, show up to the class remotely and not actually be there physically. So lots to learn. Still building the plane as we fly it. Research. I have had several people already submit their research summaries for research option 1. That is awesome. Remember, research option 2 is due next week. Okay, please don't forget that. And then research option 1 is due October 24th. Okay, we're in the month of October now. We're wrapping things up. We as a class are done in 4 weeks. Okay, we're done in 4 weeks, so keep that in mind. Any other housekeeping questions? TAs, are you seeing anything in the chat that I can address for housekeeping? Okay. Oh, I'm seeing some chats pop up. Option 1 is due, I believe, the 12th. Option 1 is due the 24th. Option 2 is due the 12th. And if we pop into our research folder, I'm just going to double check those. Yeah, research option 1 is on the 24th. Research option 2 is October 12th. No, your research, if you're doing research option 2, you need to have things in APA. If you are doing research option 1, which is just a summary of your participation in research, no, you don't have to have that in APA. Our final is not on Halloween. Halloween falls on a Saturday. We'll be taking our final October 28th. Yes, we are beginning the 4th to the last week, right? We'll be meeting the 5th, the 7th, the 12th, the 14th, the 19th, the 21st, the 26th, and then the finals on the 28th. The final, I will be making the final active during our regularly scheduled class time, and you can take that remote. Yes, you can take that remote. Veronica, yes, you just choose either research option 1 or research option 2. Okay, there we go. We got some housekeeping covered. Now we are going to catapult ourselves into this discussion of the quality of life. Now, last week we were talking about well-being, right? And what goes into well-being? Well, well-being is about flourishing, it's about happiness, it's about overall wellness. And again, I always refer to that, the cultural phenomenon of self-care. But really, self-care is kind of it's like the consumerism part of well-being. But all of it is supposed to be geared towards increasing your quality of life through activating one of 5 main areas: positive emotions, engagement, right? Just your participation in life, relationships, meaning in life, and accomplishments. anything that we do that's in service of bolstering, improving, or striving towards any of those contributes to our well-being. Our TAs did a wonderful job of providing a few examples of stress regulation, emotion regulation, and some creative suggestions on how to navigate that. Last week on Wednesday, you guys mapped on the qualities of well-being to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you were able to demonstrate just about every group that we looked at as a class showed that people, that this entire pyramid of Maslow's is occupied by something that contributes to well-being. So that the opportunity to leverage well-being happens at any point. My sleeping sucks. I was up at 1 o'clock, I was up at 4 o'clock, and then I was finally up at 6 o'clock. And up for good long stretches. My dog is a chronic barker, and so he heard something happening outside, and so he had to bark about that at 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I can't tell you why I woke up at 4. But that's all part of that fundamental wellness, right? That physiological, biological wellness. That with some time and attention can really leverage our well-being. And I hope I've convinced you guys through when we talked about states of consciousness and just in the survey that you guys took on well-being, that you just take some time and just create some personal awareness around sleep and the quality that it brings. So maybe I was prompted by sleep or cued by sleep, given our slide that we have up here. We're talking about disorders, therapies, and treatments this week. I'm going to get to some of our questions that you guys had from those exit tickets. But maybe this first person who's laying in bed with their eyes open, some bags underneath their eyes, and they're thinking about which came first, the chicken or the egg. Campfire, car, exhaust, stoplight, cat food, gotta get cat food. What would you have for dinner? What do you want for breakfast? Family and time. Yeah, that definitely is what it felt like for me. Psychology is a scientific study of mental processes and behaviors. And really when we talk about the 3 fundamental experiences in psychology, we talk about thinking, feeling, and behaving. And quality of life is informed by all of those. Now, sure, disorders is the whole reason why psychology got started in the first place. I mean, we were on a fast track ticket to figuring people out in exploring the phenomenon of disease and disorder. And we offer a class here at Boise State in the psychology department called abnormal psychology. And I abhor that because that suggests that there's a norm when really we have a range. Remember at the very first day of class when we talked about, in addition to wanting to be ethical and talk about things, making sure that the science is applied, we also want to make sure that things are understood to be on a continuum, which means that there's no beginning or end, okay? That things stretch out. And when we talk about disease and disorder, I really like to frame it in the medical model, which as a disease or a disorder. No, not one that can typically be diagnosed by an MD, but one that takes the science and the understanding and the training of a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Yes, there are surveys and there are some counselors that can provide you with some assessments. I know that the state of Utah and a few other states are working to create opportunities for licensed counselors to be able to provide medications for individuals who have disorders in order to sort of remove the medical man. But I think it's important to make sure that we always include the physiology, which is that medicine piece, that medicine piece that's in there. Now, psychiatry, remember, is basically being a medical doctor with a specialization instead of bones or cancer or heart or lungs. The specialization is in brain chemistry, okay? Tends to be what a psychiatrist focuses on. So if you want to go to counseling, if you want to have a therapeutic relationship and talk to somebody about your problems and work on coping skills and things like that, don't go to a psychiatrist, okay? Go to a counselor, maybe a psychologist, but definitely go to a counselor. So we're going to deep dive into disorders and therapies, and really I'm going to spend the bulk of our time talking about bipolar disorder, which falls underneath the mood disorders category, and schizophrenia, which falls under thought disorders category. There are several different axes in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. One of my caveats when it comes to the DSM is that it's very culturally based, which means that it's based upon our culture, westernized, industrialized culture. And what we miss out on are a lot of cultural nuances. So there's also a non-American companion to the DSM, which is called the IRI, which is used to create diagnoses. Now, one of the things that we could ask ourselves is, why does a diagnosis matter, right? Well, in our culture, you need to have a diagnosis in order to identify the disorder, outline a course of treatment, and then also have some benchmarks for wellness. Like, what is actually improving with this disorder look like? But most importantly, it's so we can bill insurance, because without a diagnosis, we can't bill insurance. As horrifying and sad as that is, that's one of the main reasons why we provide diagnoses, is so we can bill insurance. A lot of people would go for a stretch of time without having a diagnosis in working with a counselor prior to being diagnosed. It's very difficult to diagnose, but it's also very difficult to bill if you don't have a diagnosis. I would say probably the most accurate diagnoses, depending upon how severe the symptoms are, aren't really going to be achievable until you have upwards to 10 or 12 sessions with somebody. Again, that is unless the symptoms are readily apparent and pretty like out there, very highlighted. So lots of nuance to get into this. We're gonna hop back. Oh, here are our learning objectives. After this, we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the questions you guys had from your exit tickets. Disease. At the end of this unit, students will be able to discriminate between the 3 Ds of mental health related to disease and disorder. We'll be working on that one today. At the end of this unit, students will be able to identify key symptomatic differences between mood, anxiety, and thought disorders. We'll be working on that Monday and Wednesday. And then at the end of this unit, students will be able to accurately identify effective treatment modalities for each disorder. Now, I know that I've kind of assigned the content to first be about disorders and then be about treatment as far as, you know, your concept checks and things like that. But really, we're going to be talking about treatment as we talk about the disorders. So everything is in context and it kind of makes sense to you. Because our treatment, in many cases, is going to be a way to lessen the symptoms. So we're going to talk about etiologies. Where do these disorders come from? We're going to talk about symptoms of these disorders. And then we'll talk about treatment. And as I mentioned last week, I'm going to be showing you guys some clinical videos. These are horrible copies, okay? I actually have them on disc, but there's no place to play them here. So I have them on disc. I've used them for forever. So I am pulling from my recesses, the archives. I'm hoping to have a better recording for you guys on schizophrenia by Wednesday. Today's viewing is going to be a little bit rough when we look at bipolar disorder. And by rough, I mean it's not as crisp and as clean as I'd like it to be, but it'll still definitely paint the picture. All right. Questions that we have left over from our exit tickets from last week. What is the number one stressor of older adults? I'm not sure what this student meant by older. If we are talking elderly, it's definitely going to be health. Number one stressor is health considerations. If we are talking a step below elderly, this is post midlife, but not yet quite into what we call the aging realm. Family dynamics, family dynamics and personal resources. A lot of changes happen. They become empty nesters, kids move out. There are shifts and changes in career, people retire, people change careers. There's a lot of dynamics there. Now, the amazing thing about these older generations is that when they experience a stressor, it's not experienced in the same way. They have this whole lifetime of experience, wisdom, perspective that goes into it. So they actually don't have as much stress as we do. Okay, remember from that chart that I showed you guys, that graph? Younger people tend to be the ones that are most stressed out. Older people have fewer stresses. They have more stability financially, but their stressors, if I were to localize them, are primarily going to be health and relationships. What is the best way to determine a eustress from a distress? It all comes down to that cognitive labeling. Is this something I'm experiencing leveraging me, getting me to a better place in my life? Okay, am I becoming more competent in skills? Am I developing divergent ways of thinking? Okay, that's going to be eustress. A distress is something that ends up being incredibly depleting. Okay, and then there's not really a way to reframe that and say, oh, you know, it's okay. I have the resources. I can manage that. Oftentimes people will start off in distress and they'll go to eustress. Sometimes people will be in eustress and then things will become complicated and it'll become distressing. So much of this has to do with that frame of mind. And that's why the Schachter-Singer model of emotion is so important, because that is what tells us, right, the cognitive labeling. What am I experiencing? So the biggest mind shift I have seen work with students, work with others in my life coaching life, and then just as a psychologist in what I've studied is framing, right? What's actually happening here? If the shit's hitting the fan, you're really overwhelmed, you're totally stressed out, and you have 50 million things to do, if you can say, God, you know what, at the end of this week, I am going to be so much more skilled at getting shit done. Or I am going to feel so accomplished just by surviving this time. That reframe physiologically changes how you experience things. And that's where we can kind of see some of that shift from distress to eustress. Conversely, right, the opposite is true. You're having an experience, and if you compound that with negativity, like this is never going to get better, I'm never going to see the end of this, this is how it's always going to be. If you start to think in those absolutes, that is just going to compound that distress and create more exhaustion, physiologically, emotionally, right? We talk about thinking, feeling, and behaving. Your behaviors are going to shift. Your emotions are going to shift, and your thought processes are going to slow down. When we're stressed out, we don't think very well. It's one of the reasons why we always want to train our first responders. We want to put them in lots of different situations and scenarios. What am I reading right now? I think I'm reading a book about Navy SEALs. It's a mystery thriller thing, and their favorite time to train is when the weather is the shittiest, because they want their people to be able to problem solve in unoptimal conditions all the time. We want the same thing of our medical professionals and of our firefighters. That's why those trainings and those real world circumstances are important. And, to a lesser degree, not to a lesser degree, but to shift a focus, it's the reason why we have dress rehearsals, a full dress rehearsal in theater, is so people can train for those situations and those circumstances. Leveraging life has so much to do with just how you look at it. Can I provide an example of a positive stressor? Oh, God. One specific. Well, I'm leading a workshop in 2 weeks. I'm leading a workshop next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in my life coaching role. And I have it all mapped out and I'm ready to go. But the clock is ticking, right? The clock is ticking, and I know that I have the weekend before that week to really get everything dialed in. But the stress of having that due date, the stress of having that commitment is really going to push me to get it all pulled together and get it out there, because left to my own devices, if somebody said, we want you to put together a workshop and just let us know when you're ready, let us know when you're done. How many of you would get that shit done if somebody didn't give you a due date, right? Like, I would not get that stuff done without a due date. So knowing that I have this presentation that I have to make starting next week on Tuesday night, I'm going to get that stuff done. So a positive stressor is something that energizes and directs your behavior. It's motivating, right? Knowing that I have this thing coming up, knowing how intentional I want to be in the presentation, and how important it is to me to provide my clients with the best experience, I want to leverage that. I want to leverage that experience. I want to make sure that it's great for them. So it's energizing and it's directing. It's actually contributing to my life. The creativity that's happening, okay, the anticipation, so excited, a little bit nervous, but mostly so excited. That's a positive stressor. What is the best way to recognize oncoming stress? Oh, such a good idea. Such a good question. And I think it's different from everybody. I am most keenly aware of oncoming stress when I'm paying attention to my body. The first thing to go, right, when I have this, when I'm going to come up against a stress wall, is food. I start eating shitty food. I just go for the low-hanging fruit, and it's not fruit. It's salty nuts. It's crackers. It's things that I don't have to chop or wash. That's the first thing to go for me. Oh God, maybe I am getting stressed out. The next thing for me to go is sleep. Actually, physical activity and then sleep. I protect my sleep pretty consistently. But everybody has a different stress response. And so spending some time with yourself, getting aware of that. I think journaling is a fantastic way to do it. My daughter bullet journals, and she showed me this format that she really is attracted to, where she has, for the month, she has like every day of the week down in a little square, and then she has like a legend. If she color codes it this way, then it was a happy day, or this was a stressful day, or it was an anxiety-provoking day, or it was a joyous day. And so she color codes things that way. And I think that having any reflective exercise where you take some time at the end of the day and you ask yourself, how was my day? What did today look like? What did it feel like? And just building that awareness, and you're like, oh God, I was really stressed out today. I didn't realize that. I mean, I was just going so fast, so hard. To take a moment to recognize the feeling tone of what you experience is incredibly empowering. So I think that's one of the best ways, right? There's some behavioral cues, okay? And then there are feeling cues. And just off the top of my head, thinking cues, I think for me, when I'm approaching stress, because I go from this really wide open willingness to, when I get stressed, things get really, really narrow, and I stop seeing alternative solutions as options. People will provide suggestions, and I'll be like, no, no, no. I'm not giving them the creative consideration that I should to actually see if it's something that might be an option. I'm automatically shutting it down and saying, no, no. I'm reducing my problem-solving capacity. That's most likely what I'm doing. So thinking, feeling, and behaving. All three of those are great ways to sort of line that up and look at that. Is it possible to have a type A and type B personality? Oh, this is a hard one. The science tells us that we should be able to predict if you're type A or type B when you're born. Nature. But what we're seeing in the science is that there's an awful lot of nurture, right? Environmental experiences, family of origin, cultural expectations that tend to inform type A and type B. I think that it's pretty consistent. Now, topically, there are some things, and physiologically, there's some real clear markers of type A. I don't think that you can go from type A to type B without being really intentional, like being effortful in that shift. of, okay, I'm not going to freak out about this right now. It's okay if I'm a little bit late. People are late. It's not a testament to my personality or my self-worth. Okay. I think that has to be pretty intentional. I think it's really easy to go from type B to type A, especially if your culture influences that. It's really easy to go from totally chill, like super laid back, no worries, no hurries, to finding yourself in a work environment or a relationship or something else where you just feel hurried, harried, rushed, and then you start to take on a lot of those characteristics. So I don't think you can be both. I have not seen that in the science. And I haven't seen it where you could be one way in one environment and one way in another environment. I think that the impact of that personality type is pretty consistent. All right. So we already mentioned the 3Ds in our learning objectives. What I'm going to have you guys do in your first breakout sesh is I want you to consider for your learning pleasure, what do you think those 3Ds might mean? And I'll take keep them appropriate, please. There's no sexual innuendo. There's nothing. So be cool. Be cool, be cool. Any questions before I send you out into your breakout room for a quick little howsy doozy? Mood tracker. Thank you, Haley. That's the word I was looking for. Okay. All right, head out there.
I was the only one in my breakout session. I was the only one in my breakout session.
Were you in?
Sorry.
Kylie, which number were you in?
Oh gosh, I don't remember, but I was the only one in it.
Well, I'm showing multiple people in each room. My guess is that the person that went in there with you just did not engage.
Oh, well, I clicked on participants and it was like only me.
Well, maybe they didn't
I'm not
wait
sure.
long
Maybe,
enough.
yeah, they might have been just really late.
Okay, I'm still looking for you. You'd be amazed at how many Kylies we have.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a common name here.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to send you to a new room, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Savannah Mason. Savannah Mason, you did not go to your room, and Mason Litham did not go to his room. I'm just gonna take a little screenshot of that. Kylie, did you get sent to a room? I reassigned you to another room.
Nothing's popped up yet.
Okay, check to see what you have open because it's showing that I've already sent you to another room. Check your pop-ups, make sure and check to see how many pages you already have open. It might be hiding behind something.
I don't have any other windows.
Well, okay, I'm going to send you again.
Sorry.
Because right now it's showing you as in room 10. Now I'm sending you to room 5. Let me know if you see it pop up for you.
Okay, I don't see anything yet.
Okay, give it a second and run your mouse over the Zoom controls.
Okay.
And see if a breakout invite pops up.
There it is. Okay, thanks.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Gabe, real life human. Hi, Gabe, real life human. Kobe in class. Kristen. I like seeing people. Evan, Talon. People are hiding themselves from me very quickly because they don't want to be called out in front of the class. Okay, all right, all right. All right, go ahead in the chat. Tell me what you guys think the 3Ds stand for. Do me and you a favor and put all 3 Ds in there before you hit enter. Otherwise, it'll send each word independently. Deviants. People in my group were not talking. I am sorry. Next time that happens, go ahead and pop back in here, and I will make note of who those people are, and I'll send you to another room. Oh. Diversity, distress, dysfunction, disorder. Danger, deviance, distress, disorder, dysfunction. All right, deviancy. Deviance, distress, and dysfunction. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay. Yeah, our 3Ds. The first one we're going to start off is with deviance. Now, this is one of my favorite ones, right? Not only because I think that culturally this is really easy to talk about. And it's easy to talk about because if somebody's deviant, it means that they don't realize they're going counter to culture. So when you think about people who are flamboyant and extravagant and different, like Lady Gaga or Elton John or Madonna, or those people that really are out there, they understand the convention, they understand the box, and they are purposely, or Miley Cyrus, they are purposely getting as far outside of that box as they possibly can. Okay, they are aware of that. Deviance, when we talk about disease, distress, and disorder, is a different kind of deviance. They don't know that they're outside of the box. They have a certain degree of unawareness of what is happening. Now, if they are aware of what's happening, they feel deviant, right? They realize that the behavior that they're participating in is outside of cultural norms. Typically, people who are anxious and people who are depressed, people who fall on that mood disorders continuum. Not all people on the mood disorders continuum, but a lot of them are keenly and painfully aware of how deviant their behavior is. Now, deviance is set by cultural norms. So what's deviant in our culture is not deviant in other cultures. In our culture, if you hear voices, that is considered a very bad pathological sign, okay? In other cultures, like traditional Tibetan culture, that's a blessing. You are a blessed person to hear those voices. There are so many differences between our culture and other cultures just in what we'd expect. Like in our culture, if somebody's physically capable of work but they choose not to, there is something wrong with them. In a lot of Eastern cultures, when women, right, reach a certain age, what we would diagnose as chronic fatigue syndrome in our culture, they would recognize as just honoring your parents. And yeah, no, your mom doesn't have to lift a finger again for the rest of her life, and that's okay. But in our culture, because you are physically capable and you are choosing not to, right, or the belief is that you're making a choice not to, then, right, that falls outside of cultural norms. And this is normally what I do in a real live class, right, where exchange and information is just a little bit easier, but being able to think about anything that you saw this morning that could be considered deviant behavior, right? Somebody cutting somebody off in a parking lot, that's deviant behavior. That's outside of cultural norms, okay? This, when it comes to disease and disorder, this is an extreme, okay? This is an extreme. Everything that you're going to read whenever we talk about symptomology, it takes weeks of these behaviors being present in order for it to actually be indicative of a disorder. Weeks, okay? In addition to things being deviant, okay, oftentimes there's distress, right? There's distress, which means that I don't like this behavior, right? When somebody's depressed, they don't like not feeling motivated. They don't like the physical aches and pains and the lack of energy. If somebody's anxious, they don't like the preoccupation in their mind. If somebody is, now here's where we start to get into some of the gray line about distress. Distress, when keenly felt by the individual with symptoms, can actually be incredibly helpful in treatment. Getting uncomfortable, right? Realizing that you're behaving in a way that you don't want to behave in, that's incredibly motivating in behavior change and creating an opportunity for therapeutic intervention. But for those individuals who participate in deviant behaviors but they don't experience any distress, this is where we get into some trouble, okay? Oftentimes these individuals are divorced from reality. And they could be divorced from reality due to psychotherapeutic issues, like they could be in psychosis, okay? They could have a thought disorder, which is like schizophrenia, which we'll talk about. Or they could be a substance abuser. Somebody who says, I'm just, this is what I do. I use these drugs or I drink this much, and it doesn't hurt anybody. It's totally fine. In this instance, the distress isn't actually experienced by the person with symptoms. The distress is felt by loved ones and by others. This is the reason why there have been entire shows that have centered around interventions, like intervening in somebody who's an alcoholic's life, right? Intervening in somebody who has an addictive behavior around inhalants, okay? People who participate in compulsory behaviors that impair an individual's ability to think, feel, and behave. Really, that's what we're talking about when we talk about distress. So that distress, it's either going to be the person with the symptoms feeling the discomfort and being motivated to change, or it's going to be the distress of people outside of that individual. Oftentimes, if there is a separation of reality for that individual, or I guess you could think about substance abuse also as a separation of reality. Dysfunction. We use dysfunction quite a bit in developmental science. We use it as markers for development when you become functional in all ways. I remember when my daughters learned how to read and write and do simple math, I was like, well, my work here is done. I mean, I knew it wasn't done, but I also knew developmentally that if I scaffolded and got their life to the point where they could do that. They could take on some new functions. Now, when we talk about dysfunction, we can kind of think a little bit about like an elderly individual, maybe somebody who's got some memory impairment or physical agility impairment. And they can no longer manage what we call activities of daily living, or ADLs. Okay, those activities of daily living, those ones that allow an individual to take care of themselves hygienically, nutritionally. Think about that bottom rung on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Individuals' ability to manage all of those things for themselves, including sleep regulation, hydration. Okay? All of that is related to dysfunction. Think, hold in your mind's eye right now a mental health issue that you've seen. And then think about how functional that person is in daily life. What's impaired? Their ability to take care of themselves and their responsibilities. That's what we're talking about when we talk about dysfunction. I'm going to give you guys a chance to kind of roll around a little bit in each one of these disorders on these 3Ds. Now, there's a fourth D, and I saw a few of you actually mentioned it in the chat. There's a fourth D, and I count this as a fourth one because it's very rarely used. And one of the things that media has done to psychotherapy and psychological issues is it has blown number 4 way out of proportion. Okay? The majority of individuals who suffer from a mental health issue are not dangerous. But our culture really loves to paint the sensationalized version of this and make it seem as though individuals with mental health issues have a greater propensity for violence. When actually what we see in the literature, and pretty consistently, is that an individual with a mental health issue is not more likely to be dangerous than somebody who has not been diagnosed with a mental health issue. It's just that there are these complex factors that make it so sensational, but there's not a greater degree of violence. This is one of the things that we're seeing a lot when we talk about reforms in policing, and you know, this stereotype of people with mental health issues are dangerous individuals. When you see somebody who's talking to themselves and running around in a circle and hitting themselves in the head with something, that is unnerving, right? Because no person in their right mind would do that. Well, they have distress, they have dysfunction, they have deviance. But what we see when we see that, and I have fallen prey to this as well, even as an informed educator in this topic, when I see individuals participating in this behavior, it's unnerving, and I want to back away, and I feel threatened. I feel vulnerable. So one of the reforms that they've been talking about quite a bit in policing is when it is a mental health call and we're trying to figure that out, having somebody there who is trained in that perception could actually be incredibly helpful in that situation, in that circumstance. So make sure and have down in your notes deviance, distress, and dysfunction. And danger. You can include danger in there. Now, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to send you into your breakout groups again. Miss Thomas or person Thomas, I couldn't remember if male or female. I want to say it was female. But again, that's me pronouncing, something I'm still working on. Let me know if nobody chats in your group, and I'll definitely find you another one. What I want you guys to do is I want you to discuss, right? What are the symptoms of bipolar disorder? And I want you to categorize them in deviance, distress, and disorder. Okay? Thank you, Hannah, for putting those in. All right, any questions before I send you out? All right. Which number were you sent to? Can you type it into the chat? I can't hear you. The volume on this isn't high enough. Okay, thank you. I would love to have you somewhere where you can actually talk to people. I think that that's important. All right, let's see how this group goes for you. So Kaylee, check your room. You should be sent out somewhere. Okay.
Our room just got closed for some reason.
Oh, that's curious.
Yeah, I was the only one in my breakout room, and then it told me to come back in here.
Well, that's weird.
Yeah, same.
Mine did as well.
Yeah, mine just got closed.
Me too.
Oh, well, all breakout rooms apparently will close in 20 seconds anyway. I'm not sure what just happened there. Well, so welcome back, folks. Oh, what's a symptom of bipolar disorder that you can think of? Depression, mania, extreme moods, mania and depression. Okay. So folks, I do not know what happened just there, but all the rooms got closed. All of a sudden I looked down and it said closing all rooms. So sorry about that short combo. Great. I just asked you guys to put in the chat what are some of the symptoms that you guys see. Flight of ideas. Thank you for that, Kelsey. That is really kind of important. Grandiosity. Okay. Mood changes, severe mood swings, high highs, low lows, recklessness. Yes. Rapid speech. Yes, yes. You guys are great. This is awesome. Now, I'm going to show you guys a pretty extreme example. Okay, and this is an extreme example, and I will keep saying that. And remember that this video wasn't selected because this is the most typical thing. It was selected as an extreme example. So there's some big intensity here. I'm going to show you the depressive episode first, and then we will talk about it here in just a few. I'm going to do a volume check for this video first. I want to make sure that everybody can hear it.
Well, Mary, I'm glad you could come back.
Thank you, Hannah.
Can you say how you're feeling this morning?
Oh, on top of the world.
Okay.
Woo, 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 on top of the world.
What are your plans for today?
Oh, it's just going to be one great day.
What are you going to do?
Well, go out, whatever my doctor says I can do. I should say that right now.
Tell me a little bit about that. You mean you may have some restrictions?
Yeah, still.
When we first interviewed her, she was in the depressed phase of her illness. And then, quite surprisingly, 3 days later, she switched into the manic phase. And so we have the opportunity to show you Mary in both phases of her illness. Please note that certain psychotic symptoms are present in both phases.
We could talk a little bit about the night you had last night. You really had a rough night.
Yes.
Yeah. How did it start? I mean, you mentioned a little bit to me when I came onto the floor this morning.
Well, I was having like a revelation. And the devil was saying something to me. Go get her. She tried to sleep with you. But again, I didn't want to hurt her. But I did.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned voices this morning.
She's in
Yeah, I hear lots of
state.
voices.
I'll explain that in a minute.
And they said something to you about her?
Yeah.
What did they say?
Go get her.
Go get her. They say anything else?
You had to kill the devil.
Okay. So you thought she was the devil?
Yeah.
Okay. Has that happened before?
Yeah.
Where you got you got a message like that somebody was
Out to
evil.
get me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would they be trying to get you?
I don't know.
Have you put together any thoughts about that? I mean, is it because of something that you have or any special position you have in the world?
I feel like I'm on top of the world, looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find is the love that I've found ever since you've been around. Is it'll put me on the top of the world.
So they're trying to get you because you're on top?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there somebody in particular out there who's trying to get you?
All I can say is the devil.
The devil. Is it kind of like a battle of good against evil?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anybody on your side?
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Okay. Okay. What's your relationship to Jesus Christ?
He's my father.
Okay. I mean, a lot of people say Jesus Christ is their father. Do you have a special relationship with him right now?
Yes.
Can you say a little about that?
Just that
You got sidetracked there. Can you tell me what you were thinking, or were you hearing something?
no. I feel like I'm being judged all the time. And I've always said, judge lest you be judged.
Uh-huh. Who's judging you?
People.
People. Does this situation feel tough to you because of that, feeling judged?
Yeah.
Like kind of like you're being observed or,
A little bit.
Okay. Let me know if it starts to feel uncomfortable because, of course, we're just doing this to do a training or a
Yeah.
teaching thing. But if it starts to fit into some of those other feelings
And
we've
Mary
had
goes on
before,
for
it
quite
might
some
start to
time
feel
with that
uncomfortable.
same degree of
Just let me know if
affect.
that starts to happen.
What
Okay.
I would love to see from you guys in the chat is of the behaviors that she either exhibited or described. And remember, this is a clinical interview. And so this clinical interview is all about having her talk about her symptoms, having her talk about the feeling, the thinking, and the behaving. Okay, so this isn't a normal clinical session where we're working with somebody therapeutic. This is really intended to be illustrative, and that's one of the things that makes her such a compelling example, is because it's so extreme. And I know you guys already saw a snippet of the Mania, so you just kind of have an idea of what you're looking at, and as far as comparing those two states. So what I would like to hear from you first is, of the behaviors, thoughts and feelings that she described, what of them are deviant? You can just go ahead and put those in the chat. What's a deviant behavior that she'd mentioned? The paranoia, hearing things, voices, hurting someone, low eye contact, good point, like not participating in the social exchange. Very depressed affect, for sure. So a few people were chatting when they were listening. Thank you for that word, catatonic. I appreciate that. Yes. She is not medicated in this episode, in this video clip. She is not medicated. Recently reinstitutionalized. She is inpatient currently when this was filmed. And the reason why I know that is because the next one, the Mania that you guys are going to watch, or just a few days later while she was still in treatment. Those are all great examples. One of the things that somebody had pointed out, there was a discussion between a few people, is that she's got some psychosis, and the psychosis is the delusions and hallucinations, okay? Now, psychosis is also part of schizophrenia. It's more consistently a part of schizophrenia. Because her high and her low are so extreme. When she's at the pinnacle or at the most depressed state, she actually experiences psychosis where she's hearing voices, where she is experiencing seeing things that are sensorily that are not actually happening. Right. So if we were to put her into an MRI machine and she would be hearing voices, we would say, "Are you hearing voices?" And her temporal lobe would light up. Right. So her brain is manifesting that input, that experience, even though there was no change in air pressure in her ear. So technically there was nothing actually to hear, but she heard something given the activity in her brain. Very, very powerful example of depression. In depression, we have sleeplessness. That is a big part of it. Hygiene is an issue when we think about that dysfunction, the ability to care for oneself and for others. Low affect, somebody had mentioned, like not very engaged, taking like unsocially appropriate pauses. Yeah, she is not doped up. And there was one point in there where I popped in and I just wanted to sort of take you back in your mind's eye, that point at which she totally froze. That's actually what we call dissociative fugue. She's physically present, but no longer consciously part of that experience. And so then he asked her, "Where did you go just now? Were you hearing voices?" And that's a very probing question. That is not something that clinicians would normally ask. But again, for illustrative purposes, in order to make the point of depression and get at the symptomology that Mary's experiencing, where we check that out. I don't know if they've ever done any surgical to help out with bipolar disorder. No, hearing voices is not a common symptom. That's what makes this so extreme, is that there's this rare experience of psychosis that Mary's experiencing, which is very, very not standard in the disorder at all. But it makes a very powerful illustration, for lack of a better word. All right. Here's Mania. I know you guys already started sampling this one, but I'll give you some more. You know, if you can hear it.
Well, Mary, I'm glad you could come back. Can you say how you're feeling?
Can you hear that, Hannah?
Oh, on top of the world.
Okay.
Woo, 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 on top of the world.
What are your plans for today?
Oh, it's just going to be one great day.
What are you going to do?
Well, go out, whatever my doctor says I can do, I should say that right now.
Tell me a little bit about that. You mean you may have some restrictions?
Yeah, still.
Uh-huh.
I went off with my husband last night. I beat him up.
What? No. Tell me about that.
I wanted him out of there.
He came to visit?
Yeah, he came to visit me.
Okay.
And he pissed me off, so I wanted him out of there, so I beat him up.
Now, what do you mean you beat him up?
I forcibly beat him up.
You hit him?
Quite a few times. Oh, yeah, slugging it out.
You were saying something earlier about Jesus Christ and the CIA.
Okay, I'm in incognito for the Lord, God Almighty, Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm working for him. I have been for years.
Now, what do you mean incognito?
I'm a spy.
And what's your mission?
My mission is to fight for the American way.
Can you say more about it?
The Statue of Liberty.
Okay. But I mean, can you talk more about the kinds of things that you have to do or have been doing as part of that mission?
Oh, I can bring up the wind. I can bring the rain. I can bring the sunshine. I can do lots of things through Christ who strengthens me.
Okay. I mean, you can actually cause the wind to come up?
Oh, yes.
Could you do that today if you wanted to?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And what gives you the power to do that?
God.
On our walk down, you were mentioning about the air and the smells, and we saw some flowers. You like the outdoors?
I love the outdoors. It's my favorite place to be is outdoors.
Yeah.
Well, see, when I first met my husband, can I just talk?
Sure, please.
When I first met my husband, we lived underneath a bridge and down at a boat dock. We weren't married. But I believe we got married in the eyes of God down at this boat dock because he popped my cherry, and I had been married before.
When we first sat down, we asked if you could take your gum out, and you had some strong feelings about that.
I've chewed it since I was a little bitty kid. Don't hurt my teeth or nothing. I got strong teeth, and I like hard gum. I like to blow bubbles with it.
Okay. Is that a good piece?
Yeah, it's a real good piece.
Okay.
Want a piece?
No, thanks. So, talk a little bit more about the way that sometimes you start crying. I mean, what's the sort of thing that can get you crying?
Missing my mom for one.
Okay.
She died. I told you that my mom died.
I think so.
April 5th, 1993.
Uh-huh.
My mother passed away.
What happened?
Well, she hadn't walked for 21 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Am I still focused?
You are.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna pause that right there. For me, this last moment that I paused at is probably the most telling, because she moves around in the depressive episode, but has no awareness of her environment. Whereas here it becomes almost a joke to her. She goes on and she continues to laugh about this. I'm in focus. That sounds so funny. I think that she laughs so much and so hard that they actually stop the video and then end up having to restart it. So without focusing on just the differences, right? What are some of the dysfunctional behaviors that you guys saw in the mania? Not comparing depression, flight of ideas, excellent. Not just comparing the two, right? It is a massive contrast. And that's one of the reasons why I just really appreciate this example so much as an illustration. So flight of ideas is one. Lack of remorse, definitely not feeling any guilt or shame. I don't feel bad about the things that I do, and I don't worry about what people say. Inflated self-esteem, the talking quickly instead of speaking slowly. She thinks a spy is hurting, and yeah, she's a spy and hurting her husband. Well, she's incognito for the Lord. The manic laugh. She understands conversational turns. She's definitely more animated, moving right along. And I think just when we think about thoughts, behaviors, and feelings, the examples that we have here are such extremes. Like, you guys are paying attention to a lot of behavioral differences, but there's also so much feeling tone, right? She felt horribly guilty in the depressive episode, but in this mania episode, she's like, yeah, slugging it out, forcibly beating up her husband. And so just behaviorally, those differences. And then emotionally, the lack of guilt. Flight of ideas, yes, very poor attention on the first during the depressive episode, and then to have this really extreme exaggerated engagement. One of the things that I want to point out, and this is just an extension of, I don't think grace is the right word, but maybe just some perspective. When we see things that make us feel uncomfortable in our culture and we laugh about them, it's not because we find them funny. It's oftentimes because we are uncomfortable, and that is almost like a nervous laugh. And I always have to point that out, and that's actually something I normally say before I show the videos, because when she talks about the boat dock and underneath the bridge with her husband, inevitably somebody chuckles. And I've listened to this every semester for several years now. And it's still jarring to me because it's culturally, right? It's so far out of our cultural realm of acceptability that I do find it disorienting, and I do still have, a nervous response to that. Well, I'm not gonna shift gears or topics right now because we're wrapping up. What I want to do, though, is I want to just put this out to you as a challenge. Consider for yourself, right? How many people that are already touched by some sort of, mental health issue. I mean, COVID has exacerbated so many people's symptoms. They've created symptoms of isolation, and extroverts are really struggling right now because this isolated environment and this lack of easy connection, and it's really difficult. I never realized how important concerts were to me. until this happened, and just the freedom to go and be part of a collective experience of being uplifted and having our moods shift to the music together. I miss that community. Mental health is an ever-present issue. But if we, again, think about how we want to frame that, if we can think about it as our well-being, we are going to be empowered. We're going to end up on the empowered side of our thoughts, behaviors, and our feelings. Well, folks, it's been another fun day. I sure appreciate you guys. We'll be talking about schizophrenia. More videos to come. We'll actually watch a full video. Etta will watch that and talk about schizophrenia. I do want to highlight for you guys, treatment of bipolar disorder is so hard. It's very difficult to keep individuals with bipolar disorder on their meds because they miss mania. That is the #1 reason why we have a hard time of keeping people on their meds, is they miss mania. They miss feeling the rush and the exuberance. I mean, look at Mary's face just on this little frozen screen. And it's really hard to keep them medicated. And in addition to that, the medication that we use as a mood stabilizer typically is lithium. There are lots of other drugs that they're coming up with out there, but still the best bang for the buck is lithium, and it's a highly toxic substance. And so we have to start with a really small dose and build up to that. Typically, it takes about 6 months to diagnose somebody with bipolar disorder, because unlike what we got to see with Mary here, you won't see behavior change that quickly, and it'll take months for a behavior to shift from mania to depression. But typically treating, talking therapy is less effective. Drugs are by far the most effective treatment modality. All right, respect. Thank you all. Thank you to the 23 people that decided to come to our physical meeting today. Not being alone in this space means a lot to me. I appreciate you. And to all you that zoomed in, thanks for your time and attention. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you folks on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Little gratitude and harmony. I love it. It makes me so happy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go out there and make good choices. TAs, I'll see you Wednesday morning. Until then, let me know if there's anything I can do to help you.
Sounds good. See you then.
Bye.